Hi everyone, this is Cecil. In today's Yellowstone podcast, I'm going to focus on the stretch of road between West Yellowstone and Madison Junction, which is the single busiest piece of road in all of Yellowstone National Park. It's called the West Madison Corridor, and during the course of this podcast, I'll explain just why it is so busy, but more importantly, what you can expect to see and do in this stretch of road in Yellowstone National Park. What better place to start than at our lodge, West Yellowstone Lodge, which you can see at westyellowstonelodge.com. And from there, I'm going to start heading into Yellowstone. Now, for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, you may find it helpful to look at a map of the region while I'm talking in this podcast. There's two ways you can do it. You can either go to YouTube, and if you do go to YouTube, search for Yellowstone Tours. Just put Yellowstone Tours in the search bar. It'll ask you if you mean Yellowstone Space Tours or Yellowstone Tours in one word. Just select Yellowstone Tours. I see that one of our videos comes up anyway, really old video. But if you search for Yellowstone Tours without a space, it'll bring up our channel, and then you can see this podcast over there. Alternatively, go to Google Maps, put in West Yellowstone as your starting destination, Madison Junction as where you want to finish off, and you can follow along with me, assuming, of course, that it's safe to do so. What I've done for the purpose of this podcast is changed Google Maps from map view to satellite view. You should be able to get just a little bit better idea of the terrain. So we're starting in the town of West Yellowstone. This is where the west gate to Yellowstone National Park is, and if you're looking on YouTube, you can see more or less where the west gate is. Here's my first tip to you. Try and get into the park early. I mentioned earlier that the stretch of road between the west entrance and Madison Junction is the busiest stretch of road in Yellowstone National Park. The main reason for this is that the town of West Yellowstone is the most easily accessible town to all major western cities except for Seattle. So if you're coming from anywhere in the west, the chances are that you're going to land up coming into the park at the west entrance, and this is why it's so busy. The west entrance is far and away Yellowstone's busiest entrance. The second tip that I'd like to give you is try and get a National Parks Pass. It really is great value for money. And if you do have a National Parks Pass, you can to some extent avoid some of the crowds. You'll find that as you get to the gate, there'll be a sign that says, go to the right if you have a prepaid pass, or if you have a receipt from having gone in on a previous day. You will save a lot of time. Once you go through the gate, you will be given this brochure which has a map of the park on the one side. That is such a great resource. I encourage you to get that map and take a look at it. So we come into Yellowstone, and boy, just about a third of a mile up the road, we come to a road called the Barnes Hole Road. And this, I think, was once a paved road, but it's now kind of a mixture of gravel and dirt and whatnot. And there's no thermal features along this road, and perhaps this road is only for those of you who are in Yellowstone for the second or third time. If this is your first visit, you'll want to see all the thermal features, including Old Faithful, of course. You'll want to see all the great wildlife, and perhaps you wouldn't go down this road. But if you do have time, consider heading down Barnes Hole Road, and this will take you to the Madison River. If you're into fishing, this is really a great location. For those of you who are looking at a map, you can see the road sort of forks. If you go to the right, there's a picnic table there. If you go to the left, there's another couple of picnic tables over there, a little closer to the river. The fork on the right, you're above the river. And what I like to do, I'm based in the town of West Yellowstone, there's a rock in the river, and I like to, when I've been really busy and perhaps a little stressed, just wade out to the rock, sit out in the middle of the river all by myself, and it's just one of the most relaxing things that you can imagine. Anyway, so let's get back now to the road in between the West Entrance and Madison Junction. We will continue, and you'll notice that there is a line running through the map, and this is where you pass from the state of Montana into the state of Wyoming. As you probably know by now, most of Yellowstone is in Wyoming, but there are small pieces in the state of Montana and an even smaller piece in the state of Idaho as well. As we come into the park, you'll see, if you're looking at the map, an area called Two Ribbons. Two Ribbons is a great little trail. Once again, you don't have any thermal features, but it is really beautiful, and it's about 3/4 of a mile or 1.2 kilometers long. And if you are looking at the map again, you'll see you can park in one of two parking lots. I generally like to park in the second of the two, the eastern of the two, because you're a lot closer to the river. Here's a little tip for you. If you're coming out of the park towards West Yellowstone towards sunset, and I'm zooming out on the map, I don't know how far out I can go. There you go. There are some great views, some great sunset shots. If you're looking at the map now, off on the left side, on the west side, where you see Black Mountain and Bald Peak, there's a whole mountain range there. It's part of the Gallatin range of mountains. And especially if there's clouds, when the sun starts peeking through those clouds as it's setting over the river with the water of the river and the trees, it really makes for a wonderful picture. So to get back now to that little trail, you're not going to see a lot of wildlife here in the spring. You may see some bison, particularly on the other side of the Madison River, but I do see a lot of bird life there. If you're lucky, you could see osprey, and you could see bald eagles as well. Basically, in this area as well, this is the first time that you're going to see manifestations of the Great Fire of 1988. And I talk more about that in other Yellowstone podcasts. Basically, there's a bunch of what is called snags, standing dead trees, in this area. So you've got the new growth of lodgepole pine trees, and then across the river, you've got open meadows of sagebrush, and it really is a pretty part of the park. Let's continue to the east, and once again, if you are looking at the map, you'll see there's a very small pullout, and you can get a little closer to the river. Watch your step, and if you do go far off the road, please remember, always have bear spray with you. I have pretty often seen marmots in this area over here. You can go down the hill a little, but just please be careful. You don't want to disturb the animals if you are lucky enough to see them. We will continue towards the east, and we will follow the road, and we can see on the left-hand side there's a road called Riverside Drive. There's not an awful lot to see and do on Riverside Drive. It is one way, however, from north to basically southwest. So from the top of the map, if you're looking at it down, it also opens reasonably late in the season compared to the west entrance. Maybe late isn't the right word, but a few weeks afterwards, because the snow hasn't been plowed. But it does get you down to the level of the river, so you can get a lot closer to the river. Following the road in, just where it makes that curve to the right, there used to be a wonderful eagle's nest where I'm indicating if you are looking at the map. Unfortunately, late season snow brought the eagle's nest down a few years ago, and I'm narrating this in the early spring, and I haven't had a chance, of course, to get into the park yet, but we're all hopeful that the eagles will build their nest again. The problem with that late season snow, early spring snow, is that it's very wet and heavy, and this is what causes nests around the park to fall out of their trees. We will continue alongside the Madison River until we get to a point where you'll see the Madison River switches from basically being above the road, more or less to the north side of the road, to the south side of the road. That over there is called 7 Mile Bridge. We call it 7 Mile Bridge because the distance between the west entrance and Madison Junction is 14 miles. This is about halfway along, hence the name 7 Mile Bridge. There's a pretty cute, cool little picnic spot over there where you see the pull-out from the road, that little loop if you're looking at the map. We always used to go there for Mother's Day in the old days, and one year we were there, we were having a picnic, and this herd of bison came along. And boy, we had to move in a huge hurry to get back into our vehicles because soon we were just completely surrounded by bison. We'll continue on the road, and then just on the other side of the river, you'll see there are a couple of pullouts. And this is such a great place to stop because this is such a beautiful part of Yellowstone. For those of you who are looking at the map, you can see the Madison River twisting and turning, and it slows down there. And because it slows down, there is so much water there for plants to grow. And there's silt and sediment that drops down and encourages the fertilization of the area. So because there's so many plants, with any luck, you may see bison there and you may see elk there. Bison in the summers tend to migrate to the higher parts of the park. This area here, which is really open, is one of the lower parts of the park. So you will see them there in the early spring and the mid to late fall. This part of the park as well in the fall is one of the best places in the world, literally in the world, to see what's called the Elk Rut. Now, I deal with the Elk Rut in others of our podcasts and also in our virtual Yellowstone tours. And just to touch on that very briefly, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you would rather see a video of this route, we have videos, and if you're looking on YouTube, that's the west entrance. And as you can see, it's deserted. It was very, very early in the season. The entrance to the right, there's the one that is normally open for people who have a parks pass or a receipt from a previous day, but it's closed because it was so quiet. Anyway, we have these videos of every single road in Yellowstone. So you can actually watch and listen to me narrate on a video if this is of interest to you. And you can see all those videos either at virtualyellowstonetours.com. If you click on a video there, a link there, it'll take you to YouTube, or once again, go to YouTube, search for Yellowstone Tours without a space, and you'll be able to see our entire collection of Yellowstone tours. So I'm getting back now to the Madison Valley on Google Maps, and the Madison Valley is opening up just to the left or the west side of the road. When you get here, once again, go into particularly that first pullout. There are some really interesting signboards, and you can learn so much from the signboards in Yellowstone. The Park Service has done a wonderful job of educating people by putting up these signs describing perhaps the historical significance, the geological significance, or significance from a wildlife point of view. And there are boards over here, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, with great historical significance. This is a valley, and it stands to reason that this is a valley with the river cutting down into the earth. And there were 3 notable parties in the early days of Yellowstone's existence, and even before the park existed, that made their way out of the park. 3 of the early exploratory and surveying parties, and one that made its way into the park. For those of you who've seen others of our podcasts, you may be able to guess which party that was. It was Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce Native Americans being hotly pursued by the U.S. Army, but that's a topic for another podcast as well. Let's continue our trip now. As you make your way through the Madison Valley, if it's safe to do so and you're not driving, keep your eyes open for elk. I know I mentioned the elk before, And I think I was talking about this being one of the best places in the world to see the Elk Riots. And the Elk Riots occurs in the fall when the elk bugle to attract cow elk into their harems, as they build up a harem for the breeding season. In addition, young bulls will also bugle. It's the most haunting sound to draw the bull elk away from the harem and to challenge the dominant bull to a battle. It's such a great time of the year. Anyway, I was telling you. So there's an elk herd in this part of Yellowstone in the Madison Valley, which for reasons that I've touched on, but I'm not going to go into a lot more detail on, is always to be found somewhere in the Madison Valley. So keep your eyes open for that elk herd if you're not driving. It stands to reason that you're more likely to see wildlife next to the river. And talking of the river, this is very difficult to miss. If we just go back a little before the Madison River crossed over to the other side of the road, we often in the spring and the fall find elk swimming, not really swimming, but standing in the river or wading across the river. Now, those elk are really easy to see because there'll be a huge traffic jam. Talking of traffic jams, let me touch on this briefly. I said that I would mention it to you. This is the busiest stretch of road in Yellowstone. Our tour company, which you can see at yellowstonetours.net, that's yellowstonetours.net, and we offer tours from all around the western United States, as well as from regional cities like West Yellowstone, Bozeman, Idaho Falls, Jackson, Rexburg. We leave on our tours really early. Two main reasons. Number one, we want to avoid the traffic congestion in the so-called West Madison corridor. I'm just zooming out so you can have a look at the stretch of road. I told you that it was 14 miles. I see Google Maps shows it at 14.6 miles, but that's because we started at our motel. Generally speaking, if you don't stop, I always say you can add about 50% to the number of miles, and that'll give you the time in minutes that it takes. So it's generally a little less than 21 minutes to do this stretch of road if you don't stop. Now, obviously, you are going to stop. Guys, let me tell you what. In the mornings and in the evenings when you're going home in the summers, this stretch of road can take 2 to 2.25 hours. It's just insane. So try and get into the park early, or if that's not possible, the crowds tend to abate a little bit after about 1:30, 2 o'clock. The other reason that you should consider getting into the park early, and I deal with this in a lot more of our podcasts, is that the parking lots, particularly in the Geyser Basin areas, just get jam-packed and you can't find a parking space. So we will continue now towards Madison Junction, where we are continuing to the right or to the east, and every now and again you'll see a pullout. And I always like to stop at those pullouts, see what the Park Service has to offer. I remember one of them will tell you about the trout in the park and the other different fish in the park. The other tells you about talus, which is the rock that has been broken up by constant exposure to the sun. And there is so much to learn. In addition, every now and again, not all that often, but every now and again, we've seen otters in this stretch of river, but you have to be really, really lucky to see them. So I'm continuing on to the east. Bison, when they're there, are pretty easy to see. They are so big, they don't tend to hide in the trees. They are too big to hide in the trees. And as we get towards Madison Junction, you'll notice again that the landscape opens up. We've been going through an area where there's quite a few trees, and now you can see a valley to the right or the south. And this is another area where we may expect to see bison and elk. You'll find that there are pullouts, which I'm showing you if you're looking at the map, so do use those pullouts. The Park Service a few years ago put signs up on the road saying no stopping. Basically only stop where there is a pullout or a parking lot. And the reason for that is that the traffic jams are just monstrous. Continuing on, we can see, if you're looking at the map, the Harlequin Lake trailhead, and you can see where Harlequin Lake is. It's a very pretty little area, and the hike is not that long. Once again, make sure that you have bear spray with you. As we continue to the east, we'll see National Park Mountain, which I've talked about in other of our virtual Yellowstone tours and our Yellowstone podcasts. We'll then come to the Madison campground. This is the busiest campground in all of Yellowstone. It's always full. It's always sold out. One of the things you can bet your bottom dollar on as you're driving along is that you're going to see a sign that says campground, and underneath it, it's going to say full. This is a very beautiful part of Yellowstone National. This is your second or third trip, and you do have time. I do encourage you to get out over here, walk around, take a look. You'll find an old ranger station there, which is well worth looking at. And then eventually we'll get to Madison Junction. You can see I've highlighted Madison Campground, and the reason for that is that Google Maps, for whatever reason, would not bring up Madison Junction, but as you can see, Madison Campground is right next to Madison Junction. Once we're at Madison Junction, if we were to turn left, we would take the Grand Loop Road, because the road we're on has now run into what's called the Grand Loop Road. If we turn left, we'll get to Norris Geyser Basin, and if we were to turn right, we'll get to an extremely popular part of Yellowstone, which is where most of the popular geyser basins are. One last thing that I would like to show you, and this once again, if you're looking at the map, is pretty relevant. This is the first time that we see this as we make our way into Yellowstone from the west. Anytime you see a pale area, a whitish, light gray, light cream sort of area, that's an indication that there either was a thermal area there or there is currently a thermal area there, because what that is sinter that's been brought up from underground, and I'm not going to go into that in detail. And as we can see, there is a small spring here called Terrace Spring, so we know that there is currently a thermal feature there. Guys, thank you for joining me on another one of these Yellowstone podcasts. Remember, if you're looking for lodging in Yellowstone, please check out our motel at westyellowstonelodge.com. If you're looking for a Yellowstone tour, please check out our site, yellowstonetours.net. That's yellowstonetours.net. You can see all of our podcasts at yellowstonepodcasts.com, yellowstonepodcasts.com. And once again, if you want to see this in video form rather than just the audio, please check out our site, virtualyellowstonetours.com, virtualyellowstonetours.com, where you can hear me chatting away, but also look at a video of the route at the same time. Thanks for joining me on another one of these Yellowstone podcasts, and catch you next time.